from 1741.
Great, solidarity. Thank you. At the press conference here, I want to thank everyone here who's come. My name is Steve Zeltzer, and I'm the producer of WorkWeek radio here at KPFA. And on January 13th, I was sent a notice by the manager Quincy McCoy that the show was canceled and KPFA was going in another direction. So we're going to start this press conference off with a little music, and we have Carol Denny, who is a world famous singer in Berkeley, and she's written a song especially for today's event. So welcome, Carol Denny.
This song is called We're Going in a New Direction, and it's got a sing-along part, so here we go. Well, I woke up this morning and I found out I was off the air. I could not believe it, and nobody seemed to care. So I had to ask a question. I said, what's going on? They said, we're moving in a new direction. Everybody, we're going in a new direction. We're going in a new direction, and you're gone. You're gone. Yeah, when I woke up this morning, and morning mix had disappeared. No more twit-wit radio. I tell you, that's when things were getting really weird. When I had to ask a question, I said, what's going on? They said, we're going in a new direction. Yeah, we're going in a new direction. Yeah, we're going in a new direction, and it's gone. So if you wake up tomorrow and you find out you're not really there, you won't even believe it, and nobody will seem to care. Well, you're probably gonna ask a question. You're gonna say, what's going on? Thank you. They're gonna say, we're moving in a new direction. That's right. We're going in a new direction. That's right. We're going in a new direction, and you're gone.
Thank you. This press conference has been called, this rally has been called to talk about the property taxes not being paid here at KPFA. I know there's a fund drive going on right now, and we urge everyone to contribute to KPFA for the fund drive. But the question we have to ask is, why haven't the property taxes at KPFA been paid for 6 years? This is an issue that concerns us. So our first speaker, Tracy Rosenberg, has been an activist at KPFA and media for many, many years, and she was the one that was able to release this information. I was a member of the local station board, and you know something? It was never told to us that the taxes hadn't been paid. Now, one of the responsibilities of the local station board is to find out what's happening financially. And the treasurer of this local station board, Sharon Adams, never reported that taxes hadn't been paid. Maria Negrete, the business manager, never reported that taxes hadn't been paid, the property taxes. And the manager, Quincy McCoy, never reported that taxes hadn't been paid. So the question I have is, if this is a concern of not just KPFA management, but the local station board, elected local station board, which will not exist if their new bylaws passed, and yet we weren't informed. So our first speaker is Tracy Rosenberg. Welcome, Tracy.
I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that, that I did and that I found out, that I think it's important for people who have invested in this building and been invested in this station for years to know. So just to get to the bottom of the situation, no, the property tax annual filing, which is the filing that you file as a nonprofit to say, I'm a nonprofit, give me discounted property taxes, hasn't been filed by KPFA. It's a local thing. There's 5 Pacifica stations all over the country, and each one takes care of their own property and their own building. Hasn't been filed. The last filing was on February 15th, 2012. So it is a 7-year default. Starting next week, it's an 8-year default. On January 17th, the Alameda County Tax Assessor sent a certified return receipt letter to this building right here saying that the property was going to be put up for auction. We don't know who signed for that letter or where it got to. Nobody said anything. A couple of weeks later, an entity that has an interest, a foundation that loaned Pacifica some money and has a partial mortgage on this property, got that notice as well because they're part owners of it, and they said, hey guys, what's going on? And that's how we found out. So we've lost several weeks that we could have had to deal with this situation because the certified letter disappeared. So what can we do, right? Because information's important, it's a lot more important than slinging accusations back and forth and all the nonsense that goes on. I decided the best way to find out what was really going on was to go down to the Alameda County Tax Collector and the Alameda County Assessor and ask them. And property tax records are public records. Any journalist can do it. Any member of the public can do it. So I went down and asked them, and for those of you that are residents for Alameda County, your tax collector and your assessor, nice professional people. They were happy to provide the information. They don't want to take KPFA's building. It's just like there's laws in this country, right? So KPFA has to file. That's the first thing they said. Why didn't you file? File now. File immediately. Don't waste any time. Here's the papers. I brought a copy of the papers filed in February 15th. I can hold them up. It's a one-page form. Depending on how quick you are, I'd say somewhere between 4 and 11 minutes to fill out each one. Now, you have to fill out 16 of them because in addition to this studio, there's also a transmitter property up on Grizzly Peak. We haven't paid property taxes on that either. So we go 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. So generously, what's 16 times 11? Somebody do math. Okay, so we're talking about 3 hours of work. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. Secondly, you've got to pay all those back property taxes. I mean, the question here is, do you get the nonprofit rate all the way back to 2013, even though you didn't ask for it? Well, maybe, but that's up to the tax collector. That's not up to us. And whatever it is, we're going to pay it with 10% penalties and interest, and it's going to add up. So we're talking about your money, you know, $100,000, $200,000 out the door for no reason at all. Now, there's a lot of shouting going on about, oh, everybody knew about this, and oh, it's Pacifica's fault, and name changes. So I just want to address some of that briefly. First of all, from 2013 to 2018, nobody knew about it, except the person who wasn't filing the taxes. And I want to be clear that, you know, you have a local station board, they're elected to represent the members. They have to know this stuff. They really, truly do, because they're put up there as oversight entities. And when you have a situation where the oversight entities are having information concealed from them, you get a mess. And you get money being spent that doesn't have to be being spent, and you get property that is owned by the community put into peril. So here's the issue. In 2018, as I think we all know, Pacifica had to take out a loan, and they had to take out that loan because of a horrible lease that was signed with the Empire State Building, big predatory New York real estate corporation that had all the tower space in New York City after the World Trade Center fell down. And so they were like, okay, you want to broadcast radio in New York City, you're going to pay us big bucks. And Pacifica signed a 15-year contract at what were predatory, extortionate rates. And it was an escalator clause. It went up and up and up. It started off incredibly expensive, and then it went to crazy. But Wall Street has a whole bunch of lawyers, and when you get in debt to Wall Street, you pay one way or the other. So a loan was taken out to cover that had a 33% mortgage on this building and a building in Los Angeles and a building in Texas, all of which were owned by Pacifica. So from 2013 to 2018, nobody knew. In 2018, we had to take out this loan, so you have to run a title search, right, on all the property? So that's where it came out. It didn't come out until 6 years of default on property taxes. So at that point, sure, everybody said, take care of it, right? And I will tell you that I spoke to the LSB treasurer, Sharon Adams, and I did so about a month or two after it came out, and I said, so, are you taking care of it? And the answer was, yes, it will all be taken care of within a couple of weeks. So people are saying, they knew. Well, sure they knew, but they got told that it was all taken care of. And, okay, I could have gone down to the property tax office in 2018 and checked, and then I could have told you that that was a lie, but I didn't do it. And I apologize for that right now, right here. But there's got to be another system. There's got to be another system where truthful information is getting to the people who are responsible for oversight. It can't be, don't look, nothing to see here, oops, the building is being auctioned. So briefly, name changes. Yes, the name changed in minor ways. It was Pacifica Foundation, then it was Pacifica Foundation Radio, then it was Pacifica Foundation Inc. Why does the assessor care? The only reason that the property tax office cares is their job is to make sure that the nonprofit that is applying for the tax exemption is the same nonprofit as the one that filed for a certificate in Sacramento. In other words, all they care about is the Pacifica Foundation that's applying this year the same Pacifica Foundation as the one that applied to Sacramento. That's their whole concern. They really don't care what your name is. And to be real, Pacifica Foundation has filed 990 tax returns to the goddamn IRS this entire time that say on them Pacifica Foundation. So the we couldn't file, well, we certainly could file tax returns because we did that, so we could file property tax returns. And I told the assessor, because I try to be fair, he was sort of like, well, why didn't you guys file? And I said, well, to the best of my understanding, what I've heard is that we didn't file because our name changed. And he said, when did your name change? I said, the last time was 5 years ago, in 2015. He said, it's 2020. I said, true. And then he said, okay, what did it change to? I said, Pacifica Foundation, Inc. And he looked at the form and he said, but your name is Pacifica Foundation. And then there was a long pause. And I said, true. And then he said, please file all the tax returns right now, all of them, the back ones. In other words, this excuse, it's in the head. It was never in the mind of the property tax office.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to add one more thing, and then I'm going to leave it to other people. And I don't want to speculate. I want it to get fixed. And it's unfortunate that all this noise is having to be made in order for it to get fixed, because it could have been fixed a very long time ago, and the time to yell was 1 year after the property tax wasn't filed. Exactly. And I want to be clear, when I was on the board and when I was on the treasurer, it also wasn't filed back in 2011, when there was no name change stuff. And I yelled and I made noise and I did what Sharon Adams did not do, and it was filed retroactively. I'm not on the board anymore. Nobody's yelling. Nobody's making any noise. They're making excuses. And it is putting this building and this property in peril.
Well said.
Okay. So last thing. I'm just going to share this with you guys, and I'm going to say this is just a report to me. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm going to listen to the audio tonight. But some of you may also want to listen to Pacifica's National Finance Committee report that is on audio last night, because I'm being told that what it says is that the fourth quarter financials, and to be clear, Pacifica's fourth quarter is October to December of 2019, that essentially we don't have financial reports because KPFA hasn't entered any income or revenue into their ledger. It's February. That's from October to December of 2020. And if that is true, and it appears to be based on the transcript of the meeting that someone gave to me, then we really have a very serious breakdown going on. We have a situation where we don't know what's going on with the finances of this organization, even though we pay for it. We have essentially the hiding of, central information and the inability to oversee whether things are happening the way that they should be. That's really major. And I think that the lesson that we need to take from this property tax mess and debacle, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars it ends up costing, is that oversight is crucial.
We're here in front of KPFA today to get some answers as to why the property taxes haven't been paid. Also, we're here to oppose a bylaw change which would corporatize Pacifica. In fact, one of the people that this group of people want to put in as a Pacifica director, his name is Bob King. Bob King, and he was the former president of the United Automobile Workers Union. And he hasn't been active at all with Pacifica. He's not been active in media. But one of the things he was active in was at the UAW, where he was president. And he was president during a time of massive corruption of the UAW. Now, virtually the entire leadership of the UAW now is either under indictment or in prison. And Bob King was asked about this, and you know what he said? He said, well, I told these people maybe you should be careful about what you're doing, but we had to keep unity at the UAW. We had to keep unity. I think that is not the kind of person we want to be on the Pacifica Board of Directors. Somebody would say we have to keep unity by covering up corruption, criminal corruption of the UAW leadership, which is what's going on. So this is a part of the problem, and I think that we have to address it because we want to save KPFA. They're having a fund drive today, and the listeners and the supporters of KPFA have to ask what the hell is going on at KPFA. That's a question they need to have. So our next speaker is Rita Antine. She's a past Pacifica KPFA chair, and she's also active in trying to protect KPFA Pacifica. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you. Tracy has laid out what we need to do to move forward, and I think we need to move forward. But I also think we need to ask the question that people are asking about Iowa, which is it incompetence or is it sabotage? And if it's sabotage, we need to look at it. And I'm often reminded of words that Bill Mandel used frequently. He said, the government would be remiss if it was not trying to disrupt Pacifica. We should assume that there is disruption going on because of Blue Hill's vision, we're a powerful network. And we just can't risk losing this powerful network or its building due to, at minimum, incompetence and at most, sabotage. And I guess the last thing I want to say, I've been hearing, well, first of all, of the other stations in the network, at least 3 of the others have spoken about some of these issues on the air. But apparently KPFA has one of the tightest gag rules of all the stations, and I don't really understand why. And I wish there was more solidarity and risk-taking among the programmers. But I'm also hearing that, well, that it impacts the community because our vision is a community-based radio station. So when they get rid of shows like Twitwit and when they get rid of the only labor show like WorkWeek, it affects the community. We don't operate in isolation, and we need to take back this station. It's important. Thank you.
Now, one of the things about being a community radio station run by an elected board is that it's a responsibility of the community to find out what is going on. It's not a management-only responsibility. The community elects the local station board, so you would think that the members of the community would be interested in, if the property taxes haven't been paid, why that is the case. And our next speaker is Don Borgstrom, who is a community elected board representative who wrote a letter to the one of the managers about Tracy being chastised for asking some questions. So welcome, Don.
I'm Daniel Borgstrom, a board member at KPFA here. And I'd like to talk a bit about radio democracy and the role of whistleblowers, the role of community members to speak out. Okay, we're all aware, we've all been talking about the unpaid property taxes, 6+ years unpaid, and now there's a notice that the county will have to sell our building and apparently also our antenna tower in order to pay those taxes because they have not been paid. Okay. This news came out on, I think it was January 30th. Actually, it was Tracy who published this. She found out about it and let us know about it. And since then, my people have been talking about it, raising questions. The management here and people who support the management at KPFA have been telling us to be quiet. Be quiet. You're just exacerbating the problem. You're causing problems. Well, as radio listeners, I believe we have not just a right to speak out, we have a duty to speak out. Let me say that KPFA Pacifica is not a corporate, it's not owned by some corporation. It belongs to the community, to we, the listeners. We are a democracy, supposedly. To some extent, we are. Yeah, things go wrong, and we all know democracy isn't always great, but it's better than anything else in town. In a democracy, okay, well, let me first say what happened. After this came out, there was a staff meeting, and the business manager spoke to us, spoke to people over the phone, didn't show up in person. And then the general manager, Quincy McCoy, was not at this meeting, and I wondered where he was. I wrote him a letter, just said, what, you know, about this auction, what action are you taking? And I got back an automatic reply saying that he's out of town, presumably on vacation, anyway, out of town, and will not be returning till February 11th. Well, that was yesterday. So that's over a week into this crisis, and the general manager is out of town, not rushing back. I'm saying that with this 6 years of unpaid taxes, management is not doing its job. And that's where we, the listeners, come in. We speak up. This is, of course, a community radio station. It belongs to the listeners. Things should be done to the listeners, by the listeners, and it should be run for the listeners, not for the sake of, and if management isn't doing their job, then we need to speak up. Now let me add one more thing. I am recommending, right now, KPFA is in the middle of a fund drive, and some people, for years now, I've heard that they're so mad that they won't pay, donate. No, I think it's important that everybody donate. Be a member. Becoming a member, that gives you status to speak out. That makes you one of the listeners. So please donate, please be a member. I'd also urge you to attend our board, KPFA local station board members, meetings, attend those meetings. And again, I want to say that KPFA Pacifica is a radio democracy, radio by the community, of the community, and for the community, for the listeners. Thank you.
And one of the not surprising things that this management has done, and the people who support management who have done, is they've said we don't need monthly meetings anymore because we have other meetings that we're involved in. And so they've canceled the meetings, the monthly meetings, and there's an effort on the part of Don and others to say we should have an emergency meeting because the property taxes haven't been paid. And the officers of the KPFA Local Station Board don't want to have a meeting, an emergency meeting. Now, if this was a serious issue, you would think they would want to have an emergency meeting of the Local Station Board, but they don't want to meet. They don't want to meet. Why? Isn't that a little strange for the local station board? Isn't that a little strange that they don't want to have a local station board emergency meeting when the taxes haven't been paid? I would say that that raises some questions about who they are. Because if I was on a local station board elected, I would say if there's a question of paying the property taxes and they haven't been paid and the building may go up for auction, we need to have an emergency meeting to talk about what's going on. And they're against that emergency meeting. So our next speaker is a trade unionist. She's a rank and file member of CWA UPD, and Lisa Milos, and she has she's going to talk about some support for WorkWeek Radio, but also before we started the rally, a bus driver came by, a member of the SMART 1741, which is the school bus drivers in San Francisco, and just yesterday they passed a resolution calling on Quincy McCoy to reinstate WorkWeek Radio. So I think that that's an important statement because WorkWeek Radio covers the issues of contracting out, of privatization of their jobs, and what they're doing in San Francisco, privatizing out school bus drivers to the Zoom, to an Uber-type operation for the kids. So they said they want to save money by going to Uber to take kids around. And this is the kind of stories that need to be on KPFA and are not on KPFA because of getting rid of WorkWeek. So welcome, Lisa Milos.
I'm Lisa Milos. I belong to UPD, University of Professional and Technical Employees. I'm just a rank and file member. But we in the labor movement have relied on WorkWeek Radio and the Labor Video Project to cover a lot of the things that the mainstream media doesn't cover. And I just want to call attention to something that people that have no knowledge of history or who choose to forget history, is that KPFA historically has been the only medium that was covering issues that have to do with U.S. intervention in a coherent and clear way, exposing U.S. intervention in Latin America. And here I'm speaking as a Chilean American in particular. But now I'm hearing news department and KPFA considering, and even some programs that have people from the intelligence community, and somehow or another they have been transformed into our saviors with regard to Trump. None of them are saviors. Not the FBI, not the CIA, not any of them. All of them have been involved in destroying the grassroots movements and destroying the movements in the United States for democracy and for equality, as well as around the world. And what I find very disconcerting is that if not for the Telecommunications Act of 1996 signed by the Clinton administration, we wouldn't be in this mess. Because that allowed for the media conglomeration. That has allowed for us to have less and less of a voice. And KPFA was one of the last remaining standards, one of the last remaining stations and foundations that would provide a voice to the voiceless, a voice to people that do not have regular access to mainstream media. And I have to hear day in and day out on NPR about how fantastic these intelligence officers are because they're speaking out against Trump. Somehow or another they become our saviors. Now, I'm also speaking as a union member, and I find that the silence, as far as I can see, of my union, CWA, regarding the union busting attempts by management here at KPFA, and against WBAI in particular, and I find it to be kind of very hard to take, to tell you the truth, that some staff seem to feel that they cannot speak out because for fear of opposing their program. So where is the union in defending the staff, in protecting their free speech so that they can voice their opinions freely? So we should call for a forum, because what Pacifica's doing, what they're doing right now, and I just recently got an email from Pacifica where they're stating flat out right that the best way to deal with the issue about the tax and the building and to prevent the sale and everything like that is to vote in these new bylaws. What they are doing to us is called shock doctrine. They are applying the shock doctrine to us. They're saying to us, okay, you guys want to deal with this so-called dysfunctionalism that's going on, then give us the power and ram through these bylaws that will take away our power. They're not fooling anybody. They're not fooling us. That's why they don't want that coverage of the issues, because if they have coverage of the issues, then all this will come out. They are shock doctrining us. They're applying the shock doctrine because they're saying that these bylaws, ramming through these new bylaws, will prevent the sale of the building, when it's their fault that the building it hasn't been paid to begin with. They're the ones that created this crisis.
So another activist and supporter of Pacifica is Peter Ferrugio. He's a professor and an activist for KPFA.
My name is Pete Ferrugio. I'm a retired bilingual teacher and professor of education and a dues-paying member of KPFA. I've been a long-time Pacifica listener, going back to BAI in 1965, where I learned a lot about the world through the radio station, and then KPFA in the early 70s. I've always appreciated Pacifica's clear anti-imperialism in contrast to the mainstream media's pro-imperialist bias. Even though I was a left critic of Pacifica on various of its political slants, I thought it got its listeners closer to the truth than the other mass media sources. I got involved with Rescue Pacifica here because I want to reverse the rightward drift that KPFA has taken straight into the capitalist Democratic Party. Incessant Russiagate messaging and time-wasting live coverage of the neocon impeachment hearings, among other things. At the December local station board meeting, I personally witnessed the pro-management clique employing the anti-democratic tactics of control used by bureaucrats to slander WBAI and its defenders and to hide facts about KPFA's financial situation. Subsequently, we have learned that key members of this clique are responsible for secretly refusing to pay KPFA's property taxes for 6 years, thereby jeopardizing the station's existence. I believe that this pro-management clique is now concocting a cover-up to hide their role in the property tax fiasco by blaming Pacifica Central for not telling them how to pay our frigging taxes. I want to see the responsible parties fired, including the station manager, and I urge their collaborators on the local station board to resign so we can elect a new station board dedicated to rescuing Pacifica from this horrible mess. Thank you.
And you did not pay your taxes on the building, the most important building of that corporation. What would happen to that CEO?
Heads would roll.
Heads would roll. That CEO would be fired. So where is Quincy? We'd like for him to come out and address us. Where's the manager, Quincy McCoy? Because people have written to him, what's your explanation of what's going on?
There's also, I forgot to mention, there's more than 500 people that signed a petition asking Quincy McCoy and the Pacifica National Board to KPFA to put back WorkWeek Radio. 500 people have signed on. So we'd like to be able to, know what his response is to those 500 emails that he apparently received, or I'm not sure if he's receiving them or not, because when I send an email to him, it bounces back. So.
And that's one of the issues. It's not just WorkWeek Radio that was canceled unilaterally by the management of Twitwit Radio. And we have a fact checker from Twitwit Radio with us, Carol Denny, and she's got a new, the world premiere song that she's going to play today. It's called Goodbye Moral High Road. And she's going to sing this to let people know what's really going on, the immorality really of what's happening at this station and this clique that really want now corporate bylaws to be instituted in Pacifica, taking away the right of even the staff to have any representation. They would be excluded from this. We can't have the staff have any representation. That's too dangerous, you know. And Twitwit is an example of that. You know,
Yeah. Well, it's true, Twitwit was an unruly crowd. Yep. It's true. So, on behalf of Twitwit Radio and all of the other shows that have been given the boot, this is to the tune of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. It's called Goodbye Moral High Road. Please sing it with me, everybody, and the worse your voice is, the better. So, I got it. So you can... No, I'm fine. Okay. So it goes, is it a fire sale now? Now that they've locked the door, now that the morning mix is gone and summer's not here anymore, is local programming history? Is it better to sell out now? Consolidate all the assets and then milk KPFA just like a cow. So goodbye, moral high road. Let the others try to read how. Is this about the election? I want out of it now. Back to the days when we stood up for hometown radio. Is it true radio's future lies beyond the moral high road? Who will they censor now? Is there a list to check? Who stepped out of line and who is gonna get it in the neck? Well, maybe they'll get a replacement or maybe a national feed. Who's gonna get that letter that says, thanks, but your service is no longer needed? So goodbye, moral high road. Let the others try to read how. Is this about the election? I want out of it now. Back to the days when we stood up for hometown radio. Is it true radio's future lies beyond the moral high road?
Thank you, Carol. And that is an issue of morality, besides getting the truth out about what's going on in California and the Bay Area. And we need to expand the coverage of KPFA Pacifica. We have been fighting for a multimedia channel. We've been fighting for a live programming. 2 blocks from here, there was a rally of thousands of people against the Nazis, against the fascists. And we said KPFA should do live programming from that. Letting people know why people are marching, why people are protesting the Nazis. And they refuse to do that. They don't want live programming. So we have to bring KPFA back to getting the stories out live on the streets, and we have the technology to do that.
At the same point, we've repeatedly tried to get them to cover a huge struggle going on in the Oakland public schools right now against privatization and charter schools, and they refuse to even send a damn reporter to the school board meetings, which are exciting if nothing else.
Gotta say.
Okay, so our next speaker is Stan Woods, who is a former ILW member and an activist around KPFA Pacifica.
A couple of hats I'll mention because they're pertinent to the issue at hand. I used to be elected member of the local station board at KPFA. I was also the chief of the Stewards Council at International Longshoremen and Warehouse Union Local 6, and also an executive board there. And that highlights to me the importance of the WorkWeek radio getting back on the air. Last night, amidst all the stuff about New Hampshire and the still uncounted votes in Iowa, the culinary workers of Las Vegas, the biggest union in Nevada, leadership decided to attack Medi-Cal for All and attack the Sanders campaign from the right, not in any way any left critique by any remotest stretch of the imagination. And one thing about WorkWeek radio is, I think I'm safe to say that if Steve still had a show, he would try to have people on both sides of the culinary workers union on this, like asking hard questions like, how can you possibly be against universal health care for your members? How can you perpetuate the corporate myth that would take away from the health care you negotiated with employers? And the current crop just doesn't do that. The current type of labor reporters, I think they might even give a show to, always goes with what the top say, never questions, never talks about debate and divisions within the labor movement, and that's very important to have that on. We need a critical eye. We don't need just cheerleading, and so often at KPFA, that's what we all have, and that's about it. And one last thing. The International Longshore Warehouse Union Warehouse Division scored some big successes in the last few months. I'm inactive now, I'm retired, but recruited a couple hundred members of Anchorstein Brewery and also of the largest veterinary hospital in the San Francisco Bay Area. It was a real success not only because of the numbers, but because the average age was 25 when the average age of a trade union now is 45. You'd think the KPFA would highlight that, but aside from Steve, I don't remember anybody mentioning it, really. Also, last week, Tartine Bakeries, a large bakery complex in California, 250 decided to launch a unionization drive in conjunction with ILW Local 6. It got maybe a 3-second mention on KPFA News. Once again, you have hundreds of workers, most of them in their 20s. You think that would be highlighted, you think that would be top of the news, or at least top of, say, shows like Sunday Salon. Instead, you have people like Karen Greenberg, well-known neoliberal academic, who says things on the air in direct contrast to the Pacifica mission. We should never forget the FBI and CIA are there to protect us, and they made a few mistakes, but hey, everybody does. Anyway, that's about it.
That's what we want to restore KPFA. If they want to know, I mean, KPFA is bottom of the Nielsen listings. And as a local station board member, I said, why aren't we getting the Nielsen listings? Because they do get them in New York. But this, it's a question. Why are we only having 14,300 members when we have in the Bay Area 12 million people? 12 million people and only 14,300 members at KPFA. Something is wrong. And we, the programmers, aren't the ones that make the decisions about programming, about what's on. It's the management. And the management has not consulted the programmers about any changes. In fact, a programmer came out here, or a member of the staff, and said that he just heard my program was canceled. They didn't even announce that. Programs that have been on for many, many years are not even announced, so the staff don't even know. Besides, the local station board are not informed when changes are made. What I call that is corporate union busting, corporatizing the station. That's what that is, when you don't even inform. I mean, even at corporate stations, they say that there are changes in programming. They announce it to the staff. Here at KPFA, it's a secret. And that's why a staff member came out today and said he didn't even know my program had been canceled. Because it really shows you the type of operation that's being run here. Now, one thing about the ILWU is it does have a democratic structure, and ILW Local 10 has actually an election every year for their officers. And you can only serve 2 terms for their officers. And that is a democratic structure. It's something we need at KPFA. We need responsibility and accountability. And our next speaker is Jack Heyman, who is a retired ILW business agent and an activist for internationalism. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I'm here today because I'm upset with the drift that's happening in KPFA towards NPR kind of corporate radio programming. In the past, not too distant past, the KPFA radio programs have been inextricably linked to the community, and particularly the labor movement. I remember in 2002, when the ILWU was locked out here in the port of Oakland and San Francisco, actually up and down the whole coast, but it was centered here in the Bay Area, KPFA was there to interview the strikers, interview the union officials, and to see what was happening with Taft-Hartley, which had been imposed on the union. A year after that was the start of the U.S. imperialist invasion of Iraq, and there were protests in the port. Some of the largest protests in the country happened right here in the Bay Area. KPFA was there to cover that. Right, actually, not that long ago, 10 years ago, a young black man by the name of Oscar Grant was killed by BART police. And there was massive protests against that, and the ILWU shut down the ports in the Bay Area to march on City Hall, what we now call Oscar Grant Plaza, to demand justice for the family of Oscar Grant. KPFA was there to cover that. They have now taken off programs like WorkWeek Radio, Guns and Butter, and others that are linked to the struggles in the Bay Area labor community. And this is what concerns me very much. I think that right now the ILWU, which is perhaps one of the most militant unions in the country, is under attack a number of different ways. WorkWeek Radio was covering the proposal by the owners of the Oakland A's to move a stadium into the port, to take away property that's used for industrial purposes in one of the most thriving ports in the country, to make it a baseball stadium and luxury housing. And that was being covered very closely by Steve Zeltzer and WorkWeek Radio. We don't hear very much about that anymore. This is a struggle that is continuing. Perhaps more importantly, the union is now being sued for $93.6 million. That was a court-awarded settlement in Portland, which will destroy the ILWU. There's no way that the ILWU, which was founded here in the Bay Area in massive class struggles back in the 30s. This is where it started and spread up and down the whole West Coast. That union with the militant history is about to be destroyed, and I hear very little coverage about this on the KPFA programming. We need to bring WorkWeek Radio back. These are important issues for the community, for the labor movement, and it's time for the members of KPFA to wake up. We need to change the direction. We need to change the leadership of KPFA. Thank you.
Today at KPFA, they're playing programming for their fund drive about Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs and socialism. Well, I'm in favor of talking about Eugene Debs and socialism. But the question the listeners have to ask, and the staff, why would they get rid of the only labor program on KPFA? Yeah. When they're trying to raise money, playing a documentary by Eugene Debs and his life. And we played that documentary at Labor Fest. So when they produce these documentaries, and when these documents are produced and put on KPFA, you can't put a program on about Eugene Debs and get rid of the only labor program at KPFA. I would call that hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy and duplicity, but that's a common operating procedure, which the listener should understand is going on at KPFA. So I want to read a statement by the San Francisco School Bus Drivers Union, SMART, Local 1741, calling for the reinstatement of KPFA WorkWeek Radio. Dear Mr. McCoy, it has recently come to our attention that if you have removed the WorkWeek Radio program from your airwaves, and this was done with little or no community input. WorkWeek Radio has provided invaluable support to our union and many other unions in the Bay Area. In our recent struggles in San Francisco, this program helped get out the word about our issues, and it was a critical link to our efforts to mobilize support. There is no other comparable venue for working people on our local radio stations. It is unconscionable that you would remove this valuable resource at a time when workers and other labor organizations that represent that are under a constant assault. This program should be expanded. Instead, you chose to remove WorkWeek's minimal 30-minute weekly time slot. We insist that you reconsider this decision and reinstate WorkWeek Radio to KPFA. Respectfully yours, Sharon Chappell, the president of the School Bus Drivers Union. And this issue, particularly for African American, for Latino workers, is critical because public workers are under attack. Privatization and outsourcing is destroying those jobs, those working class jobs that many African American Latino workers have. KPFA, our program WorkWeek, covered that in an organized way and had a calendar of what's going on with the unions. We need to have more labor programming on at KPFA. We need to have more channels. We need to have wide programming of rallies and actions and movements, and we will continue this fight.